The sun beat down on the small coastal town in Palawan. Tourists laughed in the streets, cameras in hand, capturing paradise. But in a quiet alley, hidden from view, sat Elena, alone, starving, forgotten. She had come to the Philippines with dreams, 2 years of saving every ruble from her cafe job in St. Petersburg. The Philippines was supposed to be affordable, beautiful, a place where her modest savings could last for months. And for one perfect week, it was everything she imagined. Crystal waters, limestone cliffs, sunsets that painted the sky in impossible colors. Then, everything changed. She met a group of travelers at her hostel. They seemed trustworthy. One of them, Lucas, offered to show her a secret beach tourists never visited. She went. The beach was beautiful, but when they returned that night, her bag was gone. Everything. Passport, phone, money, all of it. Lucas and his friends had vanished. The police tried to help, but needed documentation she didn't have. The hostel kicked her out. The Russian embassy was hours away in Manila with no way to get there. Other tourists she approached thought she was scamming them, so she ended up here, in this alley, watching life pass by. By day 3, her hands trembled constantly, her vision blurred, the smell of street food tortured her. She had given up hope. That's when Pilar found her. Pilar was 69 years old and had been selling lugao, Filipino rice porridge, from a small cart for more than 30 years. She walked past that alley every morning, but today something made her stop. Maybe it was how Elena's hands shook against the pavement. Maybe it was the emptiness in her eyes. Or maybe Pilar simply recognized suffering because she had lived it herself. Pilar approached slowly and said something kind in Tagalog. Then she disappeared and returned with a bowl of steaming lugao, simple rice porridge topped with a boiled egg and green onions. Elena stared at the bowl, then at this stranger offering help when no one else had. Tears spilled down her face. Pilar sat beside her on the dirty ground and watched her eat. She didn't ask questions, didn't judge, just sat there. When Elena finished, something shifted inside her. Not just fullness in her stomach, but warmth in her heart. This woman owed her nothing, had very little herself, yet she gave anyway. Elena wanted to give something back, anything. She reached into her jacket pocket and found the one thing the thieves hadn't taken, a small notebook and a pencil. It was all she had left. She opened to a blank page and began to draw. Her hands shook from hunger, but she sketched Pilar's face, the lines around her eyes, her gentle smile, the strength in her weathered features. 10 minutes later, she showed Pilar the drawing. Pilar gasped. She stared at it, then at Elena, then back at the drawing. She had never seen herself like this, not as a poor vendor, but as someone beautiful, someone worthy of being remembered. Tears filled Pilar's eyes. She carefully folded the drawing and placed it over her heart. Then she took Elena's hand and pulled her to her feet. Pilar led her through winding streets to a tiny house barely bigger than a single room. Inside, her daughter Maribel, son-in-law Tomas, and 10-year-old grandson Nico looked up in surprise from their small dinner. Pilar showed them the drawing and explained rapidly in Tagalog. Maribel hesitated. They barely had enough for themselves, but Pilar insisted, pointing to the drawing, then to her heart. Maribel nodded. They made space at their table, added water to stretch the rice, shared their simple meal of rice, dried fish, and vegetables. That night, Elena slept on a thin mat on their floor, surrounded by a family who had nothing, yet gave everything. The next morning, Maribel brought Elena to the small resort where she worked as a cleaner. Her manager, Grace, was skeptical at first, but Maribel insisted. When Grace asked what skills Elena had, she showed her the notebook.
Grace flipped through pages of sketches, the islands, the sea, the people. Her expression changed. The resort had been struggling to compete with larger hotels. Grace had been searching for something that could make the place special, something different. She saw an opportunity. She offered Elena a deal. Create artwork that captured authentic Filipino life for the resort in exchange for accommodation and meals. It wasn't charity, it was work. Elena accepted immediately. Over the following weeks, she created with purpose. She sketched fishermen at dawn, market vendors arranging produce, children playing in shallow waters, families eating together under dim lights. But her masterpiece was a large portrait of Pilar behind her lugaw cart, painted with such dignity that she looked like royalty. When it was hung in the resort lobby, guests stopped to stare. They asked about the woman in the painting. They wanted to meet her. Grace began promoting the resort as a place to experience authentic Filipino culture through art. Travel bloggers wrote about it, social media posts spread. Within 3 months, bookings doubled. Elena offered a permanent position with a monthly salary. Elena accepted, but insisted that part of it go to Pilar's family every month. But she wanted to do more. She started teaching free art classes every Saturday in Pilar's neighborhood. She brought paper, pencils, and paint bought with her first salary. At first, 3 children came, then 5, then 20. One of her first students was Nico, Pilar's grandson, a quiet boy who rarely spoke. But when Elena gave him his first real sketchbook, something awakened. Nico drew constantly, his grandmother at her cart, his mother washing clothes, his neighborhood captured with detail and love. Elena saw immediately that he had a gift. She spent extra time with him, teaching perspective and shading, how to capture emotion, how to tell stories without words. Nico thrived. He won local competitions. His confidence grew. His grades improved. He began to believe in himself. 2 years later, with Elena's help, Nico applied for a scholarship to study fine arts at the University of the Philippines. When the acceptance letter arrived with a full scholarship, Pilar cried in the middle of the street. The day Nico left for Manila, half the neighborhood came to see him off. He carried the first sketchbook Elena had ever given him. On the first page, she had written, "Art is not what you see, but what you make others see." 1 year after that, a gallery in St. Petersburg contacted Elena. They wanted to feature her Filipino collection in an exhibition. She agreed on one condition: Pilar had to come with her. At 72 years old, Pilar boarded her first flight, terrified, but holding Elena's hand.
In that Moscow gallery, Elena unveiled her masterpiece, a 6-foot painting titled The Heart of the Philippines. Pilar, at her cart, painted like royalty, surrounded by scenes of Filipino kindness, families helping each other, neighbors sharing meals, strangers offering compassion. The painting sold for $75,000. Elena split it evenly with Pilar. Pilar tried to refuse, but in front of the gathered crowd, Elena took her hands and spoke words that would soon be recorded and spread across the world. "You gave me lugaw when I was starving, but you gave me something more important. You reminded me that humanity still exists, that kindness isn't dead, that even when the world feels cruel, there are still people whose hearts are bigger than their struggles. This isn't charity, Pilar. It's a debt I can never repay, because you didn't just save my life, you gave me a reason to keep living." The video spread across every platform within days. Millions watched. The comments poured in. "I'm crying at work right now. This is what humanity should look like. Filipinos have the biggest hearts in the world. I've traveled everywhere, and the Philippines showed me the most kindness. This story restored my faith in people.
but one comment captured it perfectly. A Filipino living abroad wrote, "We may not have much. Most Filipinos live in poverty, but we share what we have. We call it bayanihan. We help each other, even strangers, because we know what it's like to struggle. We know what it's like to need help. So when we see someone suffering, we stop. We give what we can, even if it's just a bowl of lugao, because we're all just trying to survive this life together." Seeing the world recognize this makes me proud to be Filipino. Pilar used her money to help her family and neighbors, but she also started a small fund to help other tourists in trouble, just enough for a meal or a phone call, enough to restore hope. Elena never left the Philippines. She married a local school teacher and opened an art studio that became a community center. Nico graduated at the top of his class and returned to teach beside her. Together, they created a free art program for underprivileged children across Palawan. Today, if you visit that town, you'll see murals painted by local artists, children carrying sketchbooks, a community transformed. And every morning, you'll still see an elderly woman at her cart selling lugao. Her great-grandchildren help her now. Beside the cart hangs a hand-painted sign. In the Philippines, we don't just feed your stomach, we feed your soul. Elena sits nearby, sketching, her hair now gray. People ask why she stayed, why she didn't return to Russia, why she chose this small town over opportunities elsewhere. Her answer is always the same. Because I learned that home isn't where you're from, it's where someone sees you when you're invisible, where someone feeds you when you're starving, where kindness is a way of life. I found that here, in a bowl of lugao, in a stranger who became family. The Philippines didn't just save my life, it taught me how to live. This story reminds us of a simple truth. Kindness doesn't cost much. Sometimes it's just a bowl of warm porridge. Sometimes it's just stopping when others walk past. But its impact lasts forever. Because in a world that often feels cold, there are still places where hearts are warm. Still people who give when they have nothing. Still moments that remind us what it means to be human. And sometimes all it takes is one person, one act of kindness, one bowl of lugao to change a life. If this story moved you, take a moment to like this video so more people can see it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. Share this video with friends who believe kindness still matters, and leave a comment below telling us what lesson stayed with you the most or how this story made you feel.